I represent the third world. I represent the needs and aspirations of the third world. I represent the capabilities of the third world. And above all, I represent an opportunity. It is up to you, the international community, to grasp this opportunity and respond positively. We all have a responsibility to alleviate the suffering of millions of our fellow men who are afflicted with HIV and AIDS. My company Cipla produces a wide range of quality active pharmaceutical ingredients and their formulations to combat asthma, malaria, TB, cancer, AIDS, and many other diseases. We market these in India and abroad. We have a number of international regulatory approvals, including the US FDA. Cipla's manufacturing facilities in India have been inspected and approved by regulatory authorities worldwide. In line with leading drug multinationals, Cipla is recognized as a producer of high-quality drugs throughout the world. Apart from us, there is a growing number of excellent generic manufacturers both in India and many other third world countries, including Brazil and Argentina. We have close ties with the generic drug industry in Europe and the USA. As regards intellectual property rights, we abide by the laws of the land and respect the national patent laws of individual countries. However, we strongly believe that in the third world there should be no monopolies for vital, life-saving and essential drugs. Specifically in the field of AIDS, Cipla currently manufactures and markets in India a number of therapeutically equivalent products, including zidovudine, stavudine, limivudine, limivudine and stavudine combination, limivudine and zidovudine combinations, nevirapine and didanosine. Cipla sells its anti-AIDS drugs in India at very affordable prices. We are the only manufacturer today of one of the triple drug combinations proven to be effective, under the name Triimmune, consisting of limivudine, stavudine and nevirapine. We believe that this combination is the most economic to produce. Our current pricing in India is well below US dollars 1,800 per patient per year. We are ready to offer this combination internationally at around US dollars 800 per patient per year. Based on our potential, Cipla commits itself to supplying its anti-AIDS drugs at affordable prices, providing the best of technologies for producing bulk actives and their formulations to all third world countries wanting to produce their own anti-AIDS drugs. For this, we strongly recommend third world countries to pursue voluntary licensing and compulsory licensing of still patented anti-AIDS drugs required by them. Let the patent holders present here make a commitment today. In conclusion, I quote a 1981 WHO statement of Indira Gandhi, late Prime Minister of India. My idea of a better ordered world is one in which medical discoveries would be free of patents and there would be no profiteering from life or death. To this, we should add that we all want a world where access to health care is provided to one and all, where every citizen can dream of a decent quality of life. Cipla and other like-minded generic drug companies are committed to the fulfillment of this dream. We will cooperate with drug multinationals, governments, and the international community in this Herculean task. We call upon the participants of this conference to do what their conscience dictates. Thank you.
It dates back to the year 1991 when Cipla initiated the first manufacture of an AIDS drug called AZT. We then marketed the drug in 1993 and it was a total failure in India. And Cipla dropped its AIDS project here. Then came 1997 when I read a publication that a combination of drugs can help maintain an AIDS patient, because as far as AIDS was concerned, even at that time, there was no cure. It could only be maintained. So when I read that article, I felt it was time that Cipla got back into the manufacture of AIDS drugs. And at that time also, that is towards the turn of the century, the treatment for HIV contained 14 different drugs had to be used during the day per patient. And this was too much. So when it became known that a cocktail of drugs could help an AIDS patient, Cipla then restarted its work on the AIDS drugs, and we then pioneered for the first time in the world a 3-drug cocktail. It contained lamivudine, stavudine, and a third drug. And this was the combination cocktail that we introduced worldwide in the year 2000, and which ultimately led to the European Commission inviting Cipla to participate in an AIDS conference, which took place on the 28th of September 2000. I would like you to first look at what happened a month earlier. A month earlier, I get a call from a gentleman called Bill Haddad from America, who was an activist, and said, Dr. Hamied, we want to know whether you can manufacture AIDS drugs for Africa. I said, yes, we could examine that. And then a group of 6 people met in London on the 12th of August 2000. And we sat down together and debated what the world should do for alleviation of the suffering connected with AIDS. And one of the things that came up, apart from the manufacture of AIDS drugs, was that in September 2000 there was an AIDS conference, and whether Cipla could get an invitation to speak at the, and that led ultimately to my getting an invitation, and the audience was about 200 odd people. There were about at least 10 to 20 health ministers, and there were at least 5 ex or current prime ministers present at the meeting, just to discuss AIDS, because AIDS in the year 2000 was emerging as a very, very major health problem. So this is what led to Cipla being invited for the AIDS conference, which ultimately resulted in an explosion of AIDS treatment following the event. The first thought is that the European Union first invited me, or invited Cipla. The second was that they allowed us to have a say in the matter. And that at that time was a very important event. And I said, which you heard earlier, that I did not represent just Cipla. I represented the entire third world. I represented the aims of the third world, etc. And for me personally, it was a very, very important and event, an occasion as well, that the world at long last was listening to India and somebody from India on a major subject, a health issue like HIV AIDS at that time. And at least India and Cipla pioneered the first AIDS cocktail, which became the forerunner to what we have today. So this was quite an occasion of which, even after 25 years, I'm very happy and proud of, that it led to saving lives in Africa. And that by itself is something which is heartwarming and of major significance. Firstly, AIDS at that point in time, 25 years ago, was a major health problem facing the world because there was no cure. It was a major catastrophe. And I felt at that time that if we could contribute to saving lives and caring for humanity, we should be in this area. Even though in India, by and large, the incidence of HIV/AIDS was negligible. But in Africa, it was quite something. So, and the drugs were not easy to make. It took a lot of effort to make the drugs, to make the cocktail. So this is the whole situation of HIV and AIDS, and the role that Cipla played at that time, 25 years ago, and is still playing by supplying a small quantity of HIV drugs to sub-Saharan Africa, where AIDS is still rampant, where HIV patients or persons are still alive and require regular treatment. So the story that started 25 years ago has not ended. It's a never-ending story because there's no cure for HIV/AIDS. You can only maintain and look after patients that have got HIV. I think the world became much more aware of the overall problem of HIV and AIDS, and particularly with the impact HIV had on Africa. Africa was the main center for HIV, AIDS, and the impact therefore in Africa was quite significant, with all the African countries accepting that AIDS was a big problem. They all accepted medication, and with this happening, I must say many thanks to a couple of organizations that came up at that time to fund the treatment. And what we did in the year 2001 was to supply the AIDS drugs at below $1 a day. Now this was very significant because this is what caused in February 2001 an uproar in the world. So the whole issue of treatment of AIDS is not just treatment of AIDS, but it is a very, very humanitarian issue and a human rights issue that we are able to give the AIDS cocktail. To me, that is a very, very significant step forward, and Cipla should be proud and happy that way back in the year 2000, we first raised this issue at the European Commission, that we were the pioneers for this treatment for HIV and AIDS, not for the purpose of monetary gain, but on a purely humanitarian basis. And for that, I think all of us in Cipla should be very proud and happy that we did it. I think Cipla achieved the recognition that apart from being just a simple, generic, small drug company, I think what we achieved was respect. That Cipla got the respect of the international community, of people all over the world, that here was a company that has done a good service to mankind beyond the objective of monetary gain. I think that in a nutshell, the profit was never our motive when we went into HIV/AIDS drugs. For that matter also, when we supplied drugs to Africa for malaria and for parasitic infections, the motive has not been business. The motive has been how can we help society, how can we help our fellow men, and the gestures in Africa in particular were humanitarian. I think the actions that we took at that time has today led, 20 years later, to the supply in the world of affordable, good quality medication, that even today basic drugs are simply not available. And apart from availability, how do we see that none should be denied treatment? And this is something that we are trying to do in India. And obviously the message goes to the areas where Cipla is active. How can we best provide access to affordable medication and that no one should be denied treatment? And to me, that is the basis of why we are existing today as a company making medicines. If you look at the spectrum of the disease portfolio under which Cipla maintains, one of the major points is our treatment for respiratory disease. And this is something that was started way back, not just recently. Cipla today is a leader in India in respiratory disease, and that gives us a great deal of joy and pleasure that we are doing something to alleviate suffering. we would like to do something more with the pollution that there is in India. And today what we would like to do is to also tackle rare diseases if possible. What can we do in newer therapies? We've been active in small molecules. In the drug industry, there's been a major shift from chemistry to biology. We should be more in biotech products. We are looking at gene therapy. We are looking at CAR T therapy. And another thing, along with the newer areas in treatment emerging, we are also therefore planning to look into diagnostics, because that is also a major part of the requirements of the drug industry. So there are many newer avenues open to us, and at all times the R&D, where we spend a lot of our resources into R&D, where we can have new drugs, new capabilities developing, etc. So overall, I would imagine that Cipla plays a fairly active and leading role in the development of the pharma industry, the pharma market, not only in India but internationally as well.